I'm Marc Battaglia, as Jordan was saying, co-founder of Story and Strategy, and also serve on the Brand Storytelling Advisory Board. And super excited to have this conversation today of influencing the C-suite, partly because we get a lot of questions about this topic on a very regular basis. So we wanted to spend some time to touch on this, and I can't think of two better people in the world to be up here on stage to talk about this, both who come from very different industries, but both who use the power of storytelling to connect with their audiences. So let me start first by formally introducing Annie Granatstein. She is Vice President of Content at Marriott. She oversees social, editorial, video, and digital globally, and also leads the innovation distribution, including launches on theatrical, linear TV, as well as launching 2 original short film series on Amazon Prime Video, Marriott's first ever content launch on a top streaming platform. Give it up for Annie.
Thank you.
And also the awesome Josh Reiman is joining us here too. Josh leads impact storytelling at Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Last year he launched PG&E Stories, a hub linking its films and programs with community resources and call to actions. PG&E films have been screened at film festivals. They've also been recognized with Webby, Telly, and Anthem awards. And this is actually really cool. His background also includes building a CSR program for the Confederation of Indian Industry, consulting with the Institute of International Education in Ethiopia, and overseeing media and production in Afghanistan and Yemen for Equal Access International. So Josh is a globe traveler here for sure. So welcome, Josh. Give it up for Josh. All right, let's dive right in. I got a couple just interesting stats I found that I thought could kind of level set the conversation that I'll share. 71% of Fortune 500 CMOs were serving their first CMO role back in 2023, just last year. That's a crazy number. So that means that there's a lot of folks in these roles who this is their first time in these roles, and they've only been in these roles for about 1 or 2 years. So you can imagine the risk adverseness with that stat. Average B2C CMO tenure is 4 years. It's actually stabilized a little bit. Again, but you can understand the desire for immediate results. When some of these projects take 8 to 12 months, that's a lifetime in a CMO's tenure. And then only 10% of Fortune 250 CEOs have ever had any marketing experience. So I thought that was wildly interesting as well. So just some good fun facts to start off with. It's not as exciting as last night's Gen Z cow stat that we got, which I thought that needs to be a whole separate documentary, but I'll get into that later. All right, so Annie, let's start with you. The obvious statement we kind of always say is there's no silver bullet in getting to yes, although everybody wants to know there is one, but there isn't. When we were talking, we talked a little bit about leadership point of view, how a project ladders to brand objectives is just as important as as the story itself. Talk a little bit about particularly your perspective at Marriott of the balance of entertainment and brand objectives all working together.
Okay, so I think, the most important thing is actually to think about whoever this is in the C-suite that you're trying to persuade as your audience, which sounds kind of obvious, but I think it took me a little bit to fully wrap my mind around that. So getting to know them in the same way that you'd get to know your consumer audience that you're trying to reach with your storytelling. Because each one of them has very different objectives, and as you're pointing out, comes from very different backgrounds, right? Like some of them maybe don't come from marketing at all. Maybe they come from traditional advertising. Maybe they come from something completely different, analytics. At Marriott, they might have been in the hotel industry their entire lives and started at the front desk of a hotel. So, how do you appeal to who they are as people by getting to know who they are as people? And then to what they specifically are trying to achieve for the company, and each one of them is trying to achieve something different, I guarantee you. And so an example of this would be, one of the people that I have to convince is really, really interested in making sure that everything we do is really efficient, an efficient spend. It's probably their biggest motivator. What's the ROI? What's the dollars and cents? Whereas another person I have to convince is totally uninterested and whether this is an efficient spend, what's the ROI? If I go in with those and I would just fall asleep during the meeting, could care less, but wants to know how are we going to make a gigantic impact? Much more interested in the vision, in hearts and minds. You got to come in with case studies that show that that films can have mass impact, and is going to get really big PR and that kind of thing. So it just really depends who you're talking to and changing what you're saying, what case studies you're coming in with, your argument based on that person on an individual level.
100%. And Josh, when we were talking, you mentioned the word humility. I actually wrote that down and circled it because I thought that was really fascinating, of both sides of the table needing humility in these conversations. Talk a little bit about that from your perspective. I thought that was a fascinating comment.
I think it's kind of twofold for me. I think that the first thing is, I think that there's a humility in shifting from kind of a traditional marketing lens or advertising lens to longer form, narrative-driven storytelling. Because when we go out to make a lot of these, especially more documentary style brand stories, there's not a script. You don't know, and you can't tell your C-suite folks exactly how it's going to end. You can't give them a beat by beat.
There's no storyboarding documentaries.
You can give them a story arc, and you can share that you have some compelling characters that you think are going to help you tell your story, but it's different, and so you have to be able to let go a little bit, which is not always easy. So that's a key piece, and I think that companies just generally are used to being at the forefront of their messaging, and so. And as we know, and I say this a lot, someone who's worked in corporate social responsibility and philanthropy, various degrees over the years, philanthropy is not special. It's not a story in and of itself. A lot of people expect companies to do philanthropy to some extent, to give back to their communities. We all go out. We ask businesses in our towns to give to our local schools and our local auctions and things like this. There's kind of a bare minimum that companies do philanthropy. So talking about that you give back to your community is not a story, in my opinion. And it's not a story that is interesting to most people and most customers. And so putting other voices and other experiences at the forefront and putting a brand and their faces and their voices, secondary or tertiary in a story, is not. It doesn't come natural to a lot of people in the kind of the marketing space. And I think that there's a humility that comes with recognizing that this can be effective. This can achieve our goals, even if we're not kind of beating the message down with a hammer, telling people that this is what we care about. And this is why you should, buy our product or our service. Let's let other people do that work for us.
That's great. And Annie, we were literally just talking about this out in the hallway. So in your world, there's a process with the C-suite of getting to a yes, but there's a lot of other voices. There's CSR, there's PR, there's continence, there's loyalty. All have an influence nowadays. Obviously, working for a large global portfolio company, expound on that complexity a little bit, that it's just not one yes in your world.
This is very true, too true. When you work at a portfolio brand, Marriott has 36 now hotel brands underneath its portfolio. Yeah, it's gone just in the 3.5 years I've been there from 30 to 36. In addition to all kinds of other offerings across the travel program. So, how do you ever get to yes with that kind of complexity? It's really, you have to hit a balance. On the one hand, thinking kind of almost with blinders on about, okay, who's my top level decision maker? Who's my green lighter? And really going to them, at the right moments. And as I said, getting to know them and what's going to make them excited about this idea and this foray into content. But on the other hand, also keeping in mind all these other stakeholders that you're going to want to bring along for the ride. And when are you going to go to them? Maybe it's further down the line. Maybe you go to your, green lighter first and make sure they're on board. So when you get, at the table with the people who, in my case, run loyalty marketing or are working in running content in the specific regions, whatever it is, maybe it's the media side of the business and you need to get them on board because you want to get some of their budget to help you distribute the film. Whatever it is, you probably want your green lighter nodding first, right? So you can go into those meetings and say, this person on top is supportive. It probably will put them in a mindset that's more positive. But then again, also thinking about what are their motivators, right? So why would the head of global media be interested in getting behind this film? Potentially it's because you can explain to them that they are going to get a lot more for their media dollars than if they put them behind traditional advertising and showing them case studies that prove that out. So for each one, again, what is their specific interest? And then the other thing I would caution is you do have to draw the line somewhere. At Marriott, you literally could keep pulling stakeholders until the end of time and never make anything.
She's not kidding.
Easily, like very easily. So, you're gonna have to accept, I've definitely learned this, right? You're gonna have to accept that some people are gonna be pissed that they weren't brought to the table. Some people are gonna be like, next time, make sure you bring me along. I could have helped you or whatever. And so, and you're gonna have to explain, totally get it, had to draw the line somewhere or this thing was never gonna get, people do understand that there because everybody's in the same boat in that sense. And just, being honest. Upfront about it. Like, I would have brought you along, but I already had 20 stakeholders. And maybe next time I'll lean it your way, when I have an idea that makes sense, to bring you along and have you a little bit more closer involved in the process. So again, balancing all of that out and thinking up front about it very intentionally, who are my 10 important stakeholders, et cetera.
That's awesome insights. All right, I got a 2-for-1 question here. Josh, I'll start with you. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit here. I always find it fascinating. You learn more from the no's than you do from the yeses. Talk a little bit about maybe a no that stands out to you that was memorable and you took something away from that and was like, okay, now I'm armed with something to go back with, particularly from pitching and the brand storytelling perspective with the leadership.
Well, the biggest no that I've gotten so far is a no to more budget and more people.
It's the classic no.
I think that there's I think that this is probably a pretty relatable thing. Is you make some piece of content, some story that achieves certain goals or metrics that you set out for, and maybe exceeds them, and people in your circle are really pleased with how it performed and how it did. And so naturally, or maybe not naturally, I speak for myself, have hoped that would then lead to, great, let's double down on what has worked, here's the keys to, more budget, more people, let us support you. And that's not always the case. That hasn't always been the case. And I also have the perspective to understand why, our brand storytelling is not the number one priority at this giant company too. It's a small piece of a much bigger operation. So what it has led to, though, has been some creative production work, I suppose, problem solving. And so instead of us kind of building out more of an in-house studio, what it's allowed us to do is we created an editing fellowship with an organization called the Bay Area Video Coalition that trains early career media makers in the Bay Area. A lot of people who are professional media makers of some kind in the Bay Area have gone through courses that they train people in all the kind of full production. And so we have editing fellows now, two cohorts a year that we provide footage to that help us edit content. So As much as I like, my favorite stuff that we do are some of these kind of longer form short films. We also, and I tell my colleagues this, I'm also in the business of volume. And so we're also like needing to like pump out shorter, quicker forms for different channels, vertical videos.
So that was kind of born out of that was like, okay, I got to figure out and get crafty on how I can scale in other ways too.
Totally. So we're going to have, cinematography fellows starting next year, editing fellows. And so we'll we won't have the bottlenecks that we had in the past, and we'll still be able to create as much volume, plus more people. As more people at the company see the content that we've created, the company's getting more comfortable with more people creating content. And so we really have a variety of different forms of media going up on our channels now.
That's a great point. All right, Annie, I gave you a few minutes to think there. So.
Yeah, I have a good one because I got, Mary, you don't exactly get no's, but a not yet.
Just sometimes even worse.
Yeah, because what does that mean? When I first got there, I started 3.5 years ago, right, coming out of COVID, and pretty immediately, maybe too fast, like a few months into the job, I was like, we should be making feature films and TV shows, and that's we're coming out of COVID, and we should be documenting this and going long form with it, and I had all these reasons, and I was showing case studies and et cetera, but my leadership gave me 2 reasons for not yet. One was the climate internally with like the owners of the hotels, that it wouldn't look good. Like to spend all this money, spend millions of dollars on a piece of long form entertainment when they were just struggling to recapture revenue and survive coming out of COVID, where we'd had 90% of the hotels closed down, that it was just not going to be a good look. So that was one reason for the not yet. The other one was that like a skepticism coming from my leadership, that people would actually want to watch anything that Marriott made for longer than an ad spot. Like they just didn't seem to understand that people would want to watch our content for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, because it was going to be just as good as what they could choose to watch on Netflix and HBO and Amazon Prime, that we could make content that good. Like that was just completely something they'd never thought about, and really were skeptical, super skeptical. So at that point, I realized we had to take a step back and prove it out to them, not just by showing external case studies, which we did, but by prove it out to them by taking baby steps internally to get there. And so we did that by creating 5 to 7 minute base series. The episodes are 5 to 7 minutes, getting them onto Amazon Prime Videos, you were saying, to show them, that we can get them onto a major streamer for way less money than it would cost them to do any kind of ad campaign that is reaching those kinds of eyeballs, and that we could get watch times that were like hundreds of thousands of hours, and way more than they were getting for their 30-second spots, and just continuously show them that yes, people are leaning in and choosing to watch our content. We can make content that isn't interruptive, but rather is lean in content. That is possible. And as we were doing that, the climate obviously started completely changing in the travel industry coming out of COVID. And the travel industry started booming, and Marriott started making lots of money, and the owners started being very happy. So we also got into a better place in terms of that first objection around the owners.
That's awesome. So it's kind of a crawl before we walk approach, and then let's prove it out first. Josh, PG&E Stories, just take a second maybe to talk about that. It's a platform approach. I would imagine having this platform approach helps in these conversations with leadership, as far as we have this place to put these stories now, so it's almost sort of fueling itself in that sense. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, PG&E didn't have when I started 3 years ago, PG didn't have a super coherent place to put its content. A lot of the stories that it was producing were what they call in the utility industry like pipes and wires stories, like just infrastructure, and YouTube was like a library of content, wasn't really that interesting. And so from my standpoint, I kind of felt like there needs to be a place where this can just live for a long time. And that and even more importantly, like a place that you can just keep driving people back to. I was talking to some people last night about how people kind of joke that I'm like the king of vanity URLs at PG&E, which I don't think a lot of people are using vanity URLs, but I'm like, we need to be able to just like, something that everyone remembers that you can just always be telling people, to driving people to. And so a lot of our, content now like drives people back to pgne.com/stories. And so that will like outlive like however long I am at PG&E or whatever happens, like there's a place on the website that's like easy to track to, and it's also, they're social impact pages. So they're not just a place to watch the film, but they're places to do a deeper dive into the program and the issues that the films are about, longer form interviews with people from the stories, ways to get involved, hyperlinks to, volunteer and give back and do all kinds of things.
It jumps past the why are we doing this conversation real quickly to, well, this is exactly why we're doing this. This is where we're putting these. And I can imagine this greases the wheels a lot faster in that sense. Yeah. Annie, we were talking a little bit about leadership and kind of know your audience when we're talking with the C-suite or talking with leadership. In other words, take time to get to understand what they want, what the brand's being tasked to do, what leadership is being tasked to do. And this is almost more for this audience as well as you work with partners who are coming from the outside in. I always thought it was interesting when folks would come in and pitch ideas, it was, are you adding a new work stream to my world? Have you taken a second to understand what we're trying to do, where we're investing our dollars, focus on where our dollars are going, but please don't add another whole new work stream to our world. Just talk a little bit about, from that brand perspective, looking inside out when partners come in.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. There's a lot that partners can find out before they meet with us. And sometimes it actually surprises me how many don't do their homework, to be honest. Maybe that's what you're getting at a little bit. Because you can just, like as you were saying about, it's easy to find your content because you've got this one site. It's very easy to find our content, right? So you can go to Marriott Bonvoy's YouTube channel and watch everything there. You can look at these 2 series on Amazon Prime Video. You can go on our traveler site, which is sort of like what you describe as a stories, which
read the press releases, find out what you guys are
there's a lot going on. In fact, I now have a 35-minute brand storytelling video that really delves into me personally, if you think about me as your audience, what I'm looking to do. And sometimes I do have people come into meetings and be like, I watched your brand storytelling video, and I'm like, that's impressive. And start parroting it back to me, and I'm like, all right, and he thought about it and remembered it. So yeah, there's a lot of research you can do. Marriott is kind of an open book, and if you've stayed in Marriott's, there is a channel, Marriott Bonvoy TV, as Marc knows very well, that my team programs, and so you can watch what we are programming on that channel. So there's just so much that you can do. And then the other thing I'll say is probably this is not unique to Marriott. We really have 2 kinds of objectives with our storytelling. One is a business objective. So we're trying to get something across on a business level. For us, it's really around people understanding what Marriott Bonvoy is. That it is a travel program with 36 brands, et cetera. People don't know that. It's a fairly new brand. They don't really get it. So that's our main business objective. And then we have what I would think of as more of like our values-based or relationship-building objective. And so that is to get across what Marriott stands for, right? So we stand for the power of travel, to be open to all, to welcome all to the power of travel, to really transform lives and the world in a positive way. And so sometimes we're trying to get both across. Sometimes we're leaning towards one or the other. These are very simple objectives. You can probably think about that every time you're going to meet with a brand. What are they trying to get across on a business level? What's that main business objective? And what's that main values-based objective? And if you come into the meeting already having a feeling for those, that'll give you a big leg up.
Just to build on that real quickly, we talked also about leading with, we have entertainment backgrounds and brand backgrounds, and it tends to, folks will come in and just lead with a treatment, lead with an idea, and that's the big hero. Talk just for a hot second about speaking brand when you're in the room, what the actual audience cares about. Yes, it's the creative and the treatment, but sometimes that's probably not what you should lead with if you're talking with the brand.
Yeah, I would never lead with a idea actually, unless we're already down the line and you know what we're trying to achieve, and we've asked you to come in with ideas, because it's 99.99999% chance that idea is not actually going to achieve what we're trying to achieve. We really need to be on the ground floor of the idea for it to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And that's what my team does. The people who are thinking about sponsoring ideas that are already existing and putting our logo onto things and product placement, that's not my team. So please don't come to me with finished ideas. So instead, just exactly what I was saying, like think about what it is that the brand needs to achieve out there in the marketplace. You're a consumer. You go stay in hotels, you pick hotels based on what is it that makes you want to stay in a Marriott versus a Hilton? What do you understand or not understand about what Marriott is all about? Like learn a little bit about the history of the brand. In our case, Marriott Bonvoy, it's a new brand, only 5 years old. People don't know what it is. Okay, as soon as you know that, you've got a leg up. So come in with that and then start having a discussion around what can you bring to help us solve that challenge.
Josh, do you run into that as well in your world too, with the impact storytelling of just not leading with the idea? But I imagine in your world it's changing hearts and minds. There's so many other things that have to be a part of that conversation. It's just, hey, I have a fantastic idea that this is going to work.
Oh yeah, I mean it's not the world that the sandbox that we play in is not one of like pure entertainment where you have like studio executives like pitch me a great story idea that will that's not this world. And I think it's a misconception to think like if I have a great character and I know a great story that will be relatable to a big audience and you're a company with a big audience, then it's a good story for you.
Great point.
I just don't think I don't think that generally applies in the brand storytelling world. And so it's really important to be able to like start with your business hat and whatever it takes to kind of build that skill set of thinking about around a business interests, and kind of like what do they actually want to be messaging to their customers or their communities, and start there. That's where all of our stuff starts, is just thinking about like how does PG&E want to be talking to its customers right now, and then we kind of build out from there or work backwards to find the right story.
Yeah, I just bring that up because I can remember in past conversations of sitting in those rooms, and it was coming in with an entertainment perspective of look who we've attached this project, look at the talent, look at the director, and just looking at my leadership down the end of the table. They're like, we don't care. That's not what we care about. We care about how is this helping our business ultimately. Yes, we'll get to that, but tell me that you've taken time to know how this is going to ladder up to our business and our brand in a meaningful way.
I was just going to say it's kind of counterintuitive too, because I think when you watch really good brand storytelling, you're not thinking about the brand the whole time. Like hopefully the story is what you are invested in, and then you are, the art of this work is attaching that brand subtly and powerfully to that story so that you have affinity for them. But you're not actually thinking about the brand a lot. But a lot of the time you got to start with the brand.
Last question.
No, I was just going to really agree with that. Actually, I think it is what the audience actually ends up seeing. The brand should be very subtle. It should be more like the brand is the empowerer or the curator rather than the hero, as you were saying previously. But when it comes to the background and how we got there, we're always starting with what the brand needs to achieve. So I totally agree with this counterintuitive idea.
It's great. Last question, 2 for 1 for both you guys here. Do either of you guys find that this conversation with leadership, again, particularly the brand storytelling lens, is getting easier or harder, and why?
I would say it's getting easier. And the reason is because of Barbie and Drive to Survive.
Barbie.
For me, at least. I mean, I can go into meetings since those have, hit the airways, which is since I started at Marriott. I can now go into meetings and I can say, whatever we're trying to achieve, however big that objective is, it's not going to be bigger than what Barbie needed to achieve because, my 11-year-old was like, Barbies, that's my parents, whatever, right? Until that movie came out, and it just became a gigantic phenomenon and changed kids' minds and parents' minds about Barbie completely, right? Just utterly, right? And so there's just no better example. It's fresh, and and then Drive to Survive similarly, right? Like F1 in the U.S., no one had heard of it or barely knew what it was. Drive to Survive comes out, completely changes the game. And nobody can argue with those two things, and everybody has heard of them. And they're huge, mass phenomenon, cultural phenomenons. So for me, that has just absolutely changed the game. It's almost like I don't need to go in with these more idiosyncratic brand film examples. I just need to say, Barbie, Drive to Survive.
And Josh, from your perspective, has it muddied the waters with everything out there, or are you finding that it's actually easier to have this conversation now with examples out there?
I think that it's highly contextual. I think it really depends on the company and the leadership at that company. So in my experience, the biggest hill to climb is just at the beginning, to be able to prove to your leaders that you can make longer form stories that matter, that resonate with the company, with leadership, with coworkers, with different audiences, whoever your target audiences are, and achieve kind of whatever you kind of sought out to, whatever goals, kind of metrics you sought out to achieve with that particular story. Then we have a proof point. So like we don't have to prove that we can make like high impact stories anymore. Like they believe in our ability to produce quality, emotional, powerful, narrative driven story. But each time it's still, so that part is done. What we do have to do though every single time is still like make a case for the next one. And it's not guaranteed that they're going to believe in that pitch or believe that the resources are worth the time and the effort that's going to take to do that particular story to achieve a specific business goal. So that one we still have to, kind of, it has to be a bespoke pitch for each time.
That's great insights. Do we have time for questions, or we want a couple questions? All right, any questions from the audience? I'll try to see if I can see out there.
Hey, I've got a question for you. So how do you link, or how do you maintain your brand's voice when ideas are coming to you, but you've got multiple stakeholders across the business?
Yeah, we give this a lot of thought when I got to Marriott. What is our brand tone, and not just for filmmaking, but in general, for marketing in general. And there is a team that came up with it, and it's called the Big Hearted Visionary. And we took that on the entertainment side of the coin, on the storytelling side of the coin, and thought about what does that mean for storytelling, and actually came up with a lot of examples. So TV shows, films, social media, all the parts of my universe. And this is Big Hearted Visionary. This isn't. And then within that, we also try to push the limits a little bit, right? Like, because we don't want to be. It's a balance between your brand having a specific personality and tone, and it being consistent, and people getting to know your brand, especially, like I said, Marriott Bonvoy is a new brand. And at the same time, not wanting to be trite and old, and people have seen that same thing again, and people kind of get sick of it. So you do have to want to be a little surprising, and maybe that means being humorous for the first time. That's something we've been playing with quite a bit, especially on social media, or pushing the envelope in other ways that make your brand appear a little bit bold or a little bit innovative, but at the core, coming back to that personality. And we like to think of it as like, everybody is a little different depending on who they're talking to, just you as a person. If you're going to project a slightly different version of yourself if you're talking to your parents versus your colleagues versus your kids versus you're at a party and you're meeting people for the first time, right? So think about that, your brand in the same way. Like how my brand is going to show up on Instagram, and that personality there may be quite a bit different. In fact, it is, than how my brand's going to show up on TikTok, than how my brand's going to show up on Amazon Prime Video, than how my brand's going to show up in-room televisions in hotel rooms. But all of it should be versions of that same personality, which, you know, for us got defined by this brand team. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think in our case, you know, PG&E had got a new CEO 3 years ago, and she has kind of really highlighted certain messages that were pretty new to PG&E. But one of the main ones is leading with love, and so a lot of our external messaging and kind of storytelling, I would say, doesn't explicitly use that language, but it is a guide for kind of what the center or kind of core of the stories that we are telling are. And so a lot of them are, you know, heart-centered, human-centric, earnest, kind of warm stories without being corny. I think we're trying to tell authentic stories about people's real-life experiences in a moving way. So I think that we kind of, have taken our lead from the messaging from our senior leaders.
All right, so I think got time. One more question, and then we'll wrap it up right here in the front.
I just have a question about how you answer the often consistent question of what is the return on investment that is classically given by different varieties from different C-suite leaders. I give a different, usually emotionally driven, esoteric answer every time, but definitely curious how you personally answer that question.
Yeah, like I was saying, I have a C-suite member who is mostly focused on this question. So when I present to him, I'm trying to get his green light. I'm wholly focused there. So I've given us a lot of thought. I think so. For us, and again, I think it's be different depending on your brand and what you're trying to achieve. And but you know, think very closely about what it is. What is return? How is return? You know. Defined at your brand or the brand that you're pitching to, and then very clearly show how what you're pitching is going to lead to that return more efficiently than other ways in which they could invest the money. So, for example, I talked a little bit about watch time. I glommed on to that specific metric because I realized that the C-suite member who I needed to convince had brought it up a few times and had said something like, well, you know, if we can engage people with longer content, then that's going to be more watch time, and that's a reason to do longer content. I was like, oh, he cares about watch time. He cares about how much time people are spending. So that's a metric, that's a return on investment that he cares about. And if I can show him that we're going to get more watch time for this $500,000 spent in this way than we would get if we spent the $500,000 on a traditional ad campaign, then that's going to be a higher return on investment to him that will matter. And also, you can show that the long-form content can help other parts of what you are doing work better. So, you know, we have case studies that show that when we put advertising, Marriott advertising, within our content, it performs 4 times, 5 times as effectively as when we don't. So, you know, getting them to think about the return on investment as something a little broader than just that one metric, but what it can do down the line for the company, what it can do for the other investments that they're making in other forms of marketing and advertising. And then, you know, this is maybe everybody knows this already, but brand lift studies. The more that and thinking about that broadly too. So platforms can enable you to do brand lift studies, you know, if you do a certain spend, et cetera. But you can also do your own kind of spot brand lift studies by putting questions into your content or at the end of your content, or by doing focus groups around your content. And there you can ask that exact question that your C-suite leader cares about, whatever it is that they really want to achieve, and you can show them. 8 out of 10 people who watch this content thought this thing that you said is the return on the investment. And that's amazing, right? 80%. So that's the kind of like just creative thinking about what ROI can mean for your company.
Yeah, we used to have a CMO. We did many focus groups. We learned very quickly that that's what this person cared about the most. And so you would just have quotes up on the screen of what they were saying. And every other metric just fell by the wayside. It was literally the tangible quotes that was getting us to a yes each time.
Social media, I mean, you know, some people here may focus on that as well. I do. That's actually the majority of my team. And that can really help you get all these quotes.
Exactly.
And I will put them into presentations, yeah, because that's tangible. It's emotional. You have people saying things like, wow, this really moved me. I felt, you know, whatever it was, you know, it's like these really emotional comments. And that, you know, again, like, is that ROI? Well, to the person you're talking to, it really might be.
Josh, any thoughts on?
I would just say that I think that it can and maybe should be different for every story that you do. At least with you know, every story that we produce has a different outreach and engagement distribution strategy, and so some are meant to increase people's awareness, our customers' awareness of PG&E's investment in STEM education and mentorship. Others are meant to show how we are engaged with communities of color in Oakland, for example. Others are to show that we are, you know, working with small businesses in different ways. And so we, you know, sometimes we're focused on increasing, like sometimes it's more quantitative, like you're saying, and we can point to certain metrics in terms of when we did the kind of trailer release for our Project 212 STEM film, we did a kind of a joint release. And so we were able to point to 90% of the people that watched the trailer online were non-followers of PG&E, which was a great metric to be able to show that it was reaching new audiences.
Awesome. I want to thank Annie and Josh for this awesome conversation. Give them a big
Thank
round
you.
of applause for their time.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.